Hello, this is Markus with Code. I'm recording a short video here of a demonstration that I've now done a few times at various live events, and people have always expressed an interest in seeing a little bit of a longer version for it. So this is still not going to be very long, but just to give you the full version of this. So let me switch over here to my screen setup. So what we are looking at here is an in-house application that we're using at Code to manage our entire business, anything from people to magazine issues to training and other events we are doing to just about anything we do in business. And this is an older Windows application, one of many apps that we are running. And we have retrofitted that with artificial intelligence. But let's start with something relatively straightforward here. We have a screen that allows us to search for people. This is somewhat of my test database here, but we do have some real data in there. So I'm using this to show you some stuff. I don't want to show you some data that has privacy concerns. So we built in this special mode in our application called our privacy mode, which is something that allows us to hide all the sensitive data. So what I can do in here is I have various AI features, including a typical co-pilot that we could launch over here, and we could ask it various questions. But what I want to show you today is a different AI-driven operation. So I can switch my UI into AI search mode, and when I do that, I get a query prompt here, and I can type various things in there. For instance, I can say, I am looking for people with a zip code indicating that they are from the greater Houston area and have attended one of our events since the pandemic. So I'm giving it a plain English or any other language query type of thing, and I'm sending that off to the AI. Now, what this is going to do, it's not a co-pilot type of feature, but what this does is it actually queries data. So it's different in nature. And you see it sat there for a moment, thought about it, takes maybe 5-6 seconds or so. And then we saw the query kicked in and actually ran and produced a result that I can't show you in detail here, but it says it found 367 records, which I know is the correct answer for this particular query. So here is what actually happened here. When I gave it this plain English question, people with a zip code indicating that they're from the greater Houston area, or I could have worded this differently as well. What the AI does with that, it understands these concepts. So it understands that we are looking for somebody that's in the greater Houston area and what that means zip code wise in this case. So the AI, because it has a large language model behind it that's been trained with all this information, understands what it means to have a zip code from the greater Houston area. And then on top of that, we want only those people from the greater Houston area who have attended one of our events, but only since the pandemic. So it understands concepts like when was the pandemic and when did that start, and it then can inspect the database for it. So it understands that, and it then understands our data structures. And the reason it understands our data structures is that we have given it a special kind of data dictionary that allows the AI to understand our rectangular, conventional, old-style data structure that we didn't change in any way. It just happens to be a SQL Server database. It could be Oracle. It could be a NoSQL. It could be any kind of database there is. We gave it a data dictionary that's specific to the AI from this point of view, from the names out, including dozens and dozens. I think it's over 70 tables that are available to the system in that way. And it then goes and it figures out, how do I create a SQL query that satisfies this criteria? Now, I understand that in past presentations, I have made the point that you should never run a query like that. That's still a word of caution because this is a dangerous thing to do. But the big news about this is we have now figured out how to do this. What we are doing is we let it generate the query. We then have a sophisticated process that inspects the query, first of all, to see if it actually does what it's supposed to do. It's another AI that does that. Then we inspect the query for security problems. That's another AI that does that. Then the query has to be very specific in structure as to what it returns. In our case, it's only a primary key. So we're getting back a result set of primary keys. And that result set then gets used as a subquery for other queries. And once we are at that point, we put this in a blast chamber with a fake database, essentially. Let it run to see if anything bad happens. And if all of that passes, which was these first 5 to 6 seconds that you saw there, if all of that passes, we know we have a query we can use for our purposes. That query then is only kept on the server. There's a token that represents that query that is returned to the client. The client can then say, now run me the query associated with that token, and then that gets processed on the server. And the nice thing about that at that point is we can now use it like a standard query. It can run over millions and millions of records. It can run over real-time streamed data, anything you can do with a SQL Server query, because it is really just a SQL query or an Oracle query or whatever your database might be at that point. The queries are often very, very sophisticated. I would argue that you'd have to spend a lot of time to create queries that are equal in what this does for us in a lot of scenarios, because it can create such complex things. But sometimes you want to further tweak the query. We have a mechanism here to actually take a query and then save it away, and note that it even suggests names and tells us what the query does. And we could then save it into the database, and we even have ways for our admins to then go and tweak those queries. But the key point here is this is different from a regular Copilot. A regular Copilot would be great at answering questions, generate information about the people that we're looking at. It may create a small resulting list of specific names that something applies to, but this is different. This is more database operations. We can then use a query that for instance, queries 5 million people according to some criteria, and then sends them all, I don't know, a letter in the mail or a magazine fulfillment or the follow-up information after an event that people have expressed an interest in. Any large database operation can be performed using this type of a setup.